Hi guys, welcome to another video. So today we'll be talking about the performance comparison between high-end and mid-range systems for the latest hero shooter, which is Marvel Rivals. So Marvel Rivals is a very Overwatch to Overwatch 2S kind of a hero shooter, whereby you just control a hero and then you go around shooting other heroes from the opponent team. So many of his abilities are very similar to Overwatch. Some will be straight up, like the ideas are like stolen or heavily inspired or stolen from Overwatch itself. So let's take a look. So these are the stats for my high-end and mid-range systems. So I will just show them on screen. I can probably edit them and show them in the future. So my high-end system costs about 3,600 SGD, Singapore dollars, which is equivalent to about 2,700 USD, whereby my mid-range system is 7600X with 6800 XT GPU. It's about 1,500 SGD, which is equivalent to about 1,100 USD for my mid-range system. So my mid-range system costs about 41% in comparison of 41% of the cost of the high-end system. But do we get that 60% extra FPS when we run it on the high-end system? Let's take a look. So Marvel Rivals, I've run it in 1440p because my screen is a 1440p 240 Hz, like average to high refresh rate monitor. So let's start with Ultra first. So Ultra is the highest graphical preset. There are 4 graphical presets in the game: Ultra, High, Medium, and Low. And I'll talk about why if you run low, you probably need to restart the game later. So if you're running on Ultra, on our mid-range system, we're averaging about 62 FPS, which is like cinematic frame rate. Not great, especially if you're playing an online competitive game. But take note that the game itself is running in Lumen. So yes, the Lumen 2 engine. It's Unreal Engine 5 running with Lumen. So Lumen itself is pretty intensive, I would say. So it takes a lot of resources away. So a lot of modern games are built in Unreal Engine 5. So the choice of the developers to build hero shooter in Unreal Engine 5, not too sure, but it does look decently good. Like it looks cartoony, very similar to Overwatch. But Overwatch is able to give you, like, it's on a much older engine, it's able to give you like 300s to 400s of FPS on high-end systems. So it's running really well, whereby this, even on my high-end system comparison here, on Ultra settings, I'm only running 96 FPS on my $2,600 USD high-end system, whereby the 0.1% lows is 70, so it's above cinematic frame rate. So it's about 50% better performance as compared to the mid-range system. But yeah, it's pretty taxing on the Unreal Engine 5 engine. So going down to high settings, because if you are competitive in games, if you have high refresh rate monitor, you want the highest most responsive clicks, then you're probably going to go down in the quality settings. So moving on to high, on our mid-range system, we are averaging about 98 FPS, so about the same amount of FPS we're getting on Ultra on our high-end system. So it's not too bad. That means if you're playing on a mid-range system, all you need to do is just knock down the graphical presets a little bit lower, and then you'll be getting the same amount of performance in terms of FPS as a high-end system. So 98 FPS average, whereby the 0.1% lows and about 67 and 1% lows is about 79. So moving on to our high-end system. So high-end system is performing a lot better. So another about 50% more performance, 141 FPS on average with 1% low of 109 and 0.1% low of 92.5. So, well, you get you pay 60% more for 50% more performance. So far from Ultra to high, the performance seems to scale pretty well. Let's knock it down to medium settings. So the interesting thing is medium to high actually doesn't really affect the FPS as much. So I would say for most players, it's actually better for you to stay on high. So you get a little bit nicer images, nicer graphical settings without really sacrificing FPS. Because in medium, where I've tested with both the mid-range as well as the high-end system, like the FPS is almost exactly the same as high for our mid-range system, 94 FPS, similar to high, and the 1% lows are almost exactly the same, 98.9 compared to the high of 79.2, and the 0.1% lows are even slightly lower than the high settings, like 57.3 on the medium settings, compared with 0.1% low of 67 on the high settings. So in this case, you are sacrificing graphics for lower performance, so it's actually better to stay on high. Moving on to our high-end system, you can see that when I knock it down to medium, my FPS increased just a smidge, like 149.5 average FPS as compared to the high settings, whereby the 1% lows are 117.2 as compared to the 1% low in my high settings, and the 0.1% lows are slightly better at 101.6 compared to the 0.1% low of 92.5 in the high settings. So surprisingly for my high-end system, the medium quality preset has a little bit more performance, but I would say that few FPS is not really worth it, so it's better to just stay on high. Then moving on to the esports setting, which is low, because if you are not interested in getting the highest performance, that means you want the highest response, the quickest response to your clicks, so you'll want to go for the highest FPS. So at the low settings for our mid-range system, we're averaging 137.9 FPS, which is not bad. 1% low of 111 and 0.1% low of 99. So still 0.1% low of 100. So that means regardless of anything that happens in the game, you are getting more than 100 FPS, which is not too bad. So it is still this game is still pretty demanding even at low settings, because for our mid-end build of 7600X as well as the 6800 XT is actually quite a powerful system. So maybe in the future I do have a low-end system which has a Xeon, an older Xeon, as well as probably I'll put in a Vega 56 GPU. So it will work out to be about a 300 USD or like a 500 SGD build. So if you guys are interested to see the performance of Marvel Rivals on a low-end system, to see how bad it can be, is it even playable on a low-end system, do comment in the comment below, so I will make that video when I have the time. Okay, so so in this following chart, what I wanted to show is that if you are going down to the low settings, right? Maybe from high, you want to try out low settings to get more FPS. Make sure you restart the game. That means you quit the game entirely and rerun it from Steam itself. Because I've actually tested, like adjusted to low without restarting the game, and I find that the FPS actually drops. Like in this case, if you look at low to medium or to high, without restarting the game, my low settings FPS is actually lower than my high settings FPS. So which is, there's something wrong, right? So I actually found that there was a bug or something like that where some of the settings don't really apply well, and it actually sort of like bogs down the system, which if you clear the cache and stuff like that, if you totally restart the game from scratch, quit out from Steam, and then restart the game from Steam itself, then it tends to resolve the issues. Okay, so going over to our high-end system. So at low settings, I'm averaging about 214.5 FPS on average, with 1% low of 158 and 0.1% low of 140. So if you're playing Marvel Rivals exclusively, that means if you have a high-end system, even if your monitor is like 160 Hz or 145 Hz, it's perfectly sufficient. It's perfectly sufficient because it's very rare for it to hit 214 Hz. Like on my 240 Hz refresh rate monitor, I can't even utilize it to the max for this particular game, even at the low settings. Okay, then the same kind of behavior happened even on my high-end system as well, whereby if I didn't restart the game and I set it to low, my average FPS was 136, was actually lower than my high settings FPS of 141. So if you are going to low, this is just a PSA. You definitely want to restart the game from scratch in order to get the proper low settings so that you see your FPS actually get higher from sacrificing your graphics by going down to low. Okay, so that is it for my comparison, my Marvel Rivals performance comparison between high-end and mid-range systems. How are you enjoying the game so far? I think it's pretty decent. I haven't had much time to play it other than just benchmarking. Though, sound in the comments what you think about whether this video comparison is useful for you if you have a mid-range system, or if you have a high-end system, or if you have a lower-end system. So if you'd like to see my FPS performance comparison for Marvel Rivals on a much lower-end system, do sound out in the comments, and if there's enough interest, I'll try and make a video on it. Okay, see you guys in the next video.